They'd been together for as long as anyone could remember. 50 years of shared mornings, quiet evenings, laughter, and sometimes tears. Their home was small, but it was always warm. The walls were filled with memories, photos of trips long past, old paintings they had bought together, and trinkets from days that seemed simpler. Friends often said they were the perfect couple, though in reality, they were just two people who had chosen to walk life's path together, step by step, through thick and thin. Every morning, the husband would wake before dawn. He liked the quiet hours, the soft light of the rising sun, and the way the world seemed to hold its breath before everyone else stirred. He would make tea and quietly bring it to the kitchen table where she would already be waiting. She had never been an early riser, but she enjoyed those peaceful moments before the day began. The smell of freshly brewed tea, the sound of birds outside, and the presence of someone who had been her closest companion for decades. Their routine was simple but comforting. After breakfast, he would tend to the garden. She loved watching him there, moving carefully among the plants, speaking to them as if they understood him. He often said that talking to the flowers made him feel closer to life itself, and she would smile, pretending to listen, though she always felt the warmth of his words. She, on the other hand, preferred the indoors. She would dust the shelves, prepare the house for visitors, or sit by the window with a book. Sometimes she would watch him through the glass, marveling at how, even after 50 years, she still noticed the small things, the way he tilted his head when concentrating, the faint smile that appeared when he thought no one was looking. They had celebrated many milestones together: weddings, anniversaries, birthdays, and countless small victories that life quietly offered. Their love had grown in ways that were subtle but strong, built not on grand gestures but on small acts of care repeated day after day. He would always remember to tie her scarf on chilly mornings, and she would leave little notes in his coat pocket, simple words that reminded him he was loved. To outsiders, these things might have seemed ordinary, but for them, these were the threads that held their long life together. Neighbors often came by, drawn not only by their kindness but also by the sense of stability they exuded. In a world that moved too fast and changed too often, the couple was like a calm harbor. People sought their advice, shared their worries, or simply came to sit for a while, enjoying the quiet comfort that seemed to radiate from their home. The husband, with his calm voice and patient demeanor, listened more than he spoke, while she offered warmth and gentle humor that made everyone feel welcome. Together they created a world that was safe, simple, and full of love. Yet even in this seemingly perfect life, there were quiet moments of reflection. They had faced challenges, of course. Life had tested them in ways that sometimes felt unfair. Illnesses had come, work had brought stress, and losses had left empty spaces that could never fully be filled. But through it all, they had remained side by side. It was not that life had been easy, it never was, but they had found a way to carry it together. There was a magic in their routine that outsiders could not always see. It was in the way he would gently hold her hand when she seemed weary. It was in the laughter they shared over silly jokes no one else would understand. It was in the quiet comfort of simply being near each other, the kind of closeness that only grows over decades. For them, 50 years was not just a measure of time. It was proof of endurance, patience, and a love that had survived life's storms. On a particular evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, they sat together on the porch. The husband sipped his tea and the wife leaned back in her chair, letting the soft breeze brush her face. They watched the world slowly darken, knowing that another ordinary day had passed, full of quiet happiness and shared moments. They had no idea that life was about to reveal a secret that would change everything, a truth hidden for decades that might challenge everything they had believed about each other. But for now, they simply existed together, two people bound by love, routine, and 50 years of life shared side by side. Life went on as it had for decades. Mornings were quiet, afternoons calm, and evenings filled with small, comforting routines. On the surface, nothing seemed out of place. The couple laughed together, shared tea on the porch, and celebrated small victories like a plant blooming in the garden or a neighbor stopping by to chat. Their life appeared perfect, stable, predictable, and full of love. But over time, small things began to feel a little different. Little moments that once seemed ordinary started to stand out. The husband would sometimes leave the house without telling anyone where he was going. He would come back hours later with a quiet excuse, smiling as if nothing had happened. She never pressed him too hard. She trusted him completely. After 50 years together, she felt she knew him in ways no one else could. She believed he would never hurt her. Still, the mind has a way of noticing things even when the heart refuses to see. There were nights when she would wake up and find him standing by the window, staring out silently. When she asked if everything was okay, he would just nod and return to bed. There were letters she occasionally found tucked into drawers or books, folded neatly, and addressed in handwriting she recognized but didn't fully understand. Some were from years ago, some were recent. Most seemed harmless, old bills, postcards from friends, but a few carried a tone that made her pause, a subtle unease she could not explain. She tried to dismiss it all. After all, who really examines every small thing in a life shared for 50 years? People have secrets. Everyone has parts of themselves they keep hidden. She loved him, truly, and that love had been tested and strengthened by years of shared struggles, losses, and victories. Surely nothing he could hide would be harmful. And yet the little moments kept surfacing. The late-night phone calls he would pretend were business matters, the faint worry in his eyes when she asked questions, the hesitation in his voice when discussing certain topics. Friends and neighbors noticed a subtle change, too. They would comment on how he seemed distracted at times or how she seemed quieter in the evenings. But nothing overt ever came out. They were still the couple everyone admired, the couple who had endured life's storms together. Yet the wife felt a growing tension she could not name. Something was just slightly off, like a picture hanging a little crooked on a wall. It didn't ruin the beauty of the scene, but it left her uneasy. Despite this unease, life continued. Family gatherings brought laughter and chatter, children and grandchildren filling the house with joy. He would tell stories from his youth, making everyone laugh, while she would smile quietly, soaking in the warmth of family. But sometimes, when the house quieted down, she would find herself thinking about those odd little moments. Letters, late nights, evasive answers. She didn't know what to make of them. She loved him deeply, but there was a flicker of doubt she could not entirely shake. She tried to talk to him gently about minor concerns, careful not to sound accusatory. "I noticed this letter," she would say softly, or, "You were quiet last night, is everything okay?" He would always reassure her, sometimes with a hand over hers, sometimes with a soft laugh. "You worry too much," he would say. "There's nothing to worry about," and she believed him. Of course she did. After 50 years, who could she not believe? He was the man who had carried her through hardships, who had comforted her in moments of grief, who had laughed with her in moments of joy. Still, small doubts lingered in the corners of her mind. There was a strange mixture of trust and unease, like standing on the edge of a calm lake but feeling the pull of something unseen beneath the surface. It made her pay more attention, notice small details she had once ignored. A receipt tucked into a drawer, a name mentioned in passing, a fleeting expression in his eyes. Nothing concrete, nothing that could be proven, just a whisper of suspicion that she could not ignore. Even as she noticed these things, she did not want to believe the worst. Her life with him had been full of love, warmth, and shared memories. Could one hidden truth really undo 50 years of life together? She told herself no. And yet, the seed of doubt had been planted, and once it grows, it does not easily fade. Then came a day when an unusual task forced her to look closer. He had fallen ill slightly, nothing serious, but enough that she decided to help him sort through some old boxes in the attic. Boxes he had never wanted to open. They were filled with memories, photographs, letters, old keepsakes, and stacks of documents. At first it was fun, like taking a stroll through the past. They laughed over old photos, remembered friends from years gone by, and shared stories of their youth. But as the afternoon stretched on, she began to notice things that didn't fit into the story she had always known. Some papers were marked with dates and names she did not recognize. Some photographs seemed oddly placed. And then there was a stack of letters, tied with a ribbon addressed to people she had never heard of. She felt a strange chill as she held them, her heart beating faster. Something about them felt wrong. She put them aside, convincing herself that curiosity was getting the better of her. Perhaps they were old friends, distant relatives, or matters long forgotten. Surely nothing could threaten what they had built together. And yet a tiny, nagging thought whispered in the back of her mind. Could it be possible that the life she thought she knew was only half the story? That the man she had loved for 50 years had parts of himself hidden, secrets he had carried quietly, shielded from her even as he shared everything else? She could not stop thinking about it. The unease grew, subtle but persistent, like a shadow at the edge of a sunlit room. That evening, she sat by the window alone, staring out at the garden he had tended so lovingly. The flowers swayed gently in the breeze, and the sun painted everything in golden light, but she could not shake the feeling that beneath the beauty lay something unknown. She loved him, always had, always would, but she realized that love alone might not prepare her for the truth that could be hidden in those letters and papers. The days that followed were filled with small reminders that life is rarely as simple as it seems. His smile, his touch, his gentle voice, each moment of normalcy now carried the weight of uncertainty. She did not yet know the truth, but she could feel it, hidden in plain sight, waiting to be uncovered. And though she could not see it yet, life was quietly preparing her for a revelation that would shake the foundation of everything she had ever believed. Days passed quietly, almost as if nothing had changed. The husband continued his morning routine, tending to the garden and making tea, while she went about her chores, pretending that the unease she felt was nothing more than a passing worry. But the letters, the photographs, and the documents from the attic refused to leave her mind. They were like small stones in her pocket, heavy enough to be felt but hidden enough not to disturb her every step. One afternoon, while he rested in his chair, she decided she could no longer ignore them. She carefully pulled the ribboned stack of letters from the attic box, her hands trembling slightly. She had promised herself she would only glance at them, just enough to ease her curiosity. But as she untied the ribbon, she felt a knot tighten in her stomach. The letters were addressed to people whose names she had never heard. Some were in handwriting she did recognize, the husband's, but the tone of the writing was strange, formal, precise, and distant. Curiosity gave way to a nervous fear. She opened one of the letters and began to read. The words were polite but carried hints of something hidden. There were references to money, places she had never known he had visited, and things that seemed to belong to a life she had never shared with him. At first, she told herself it was nothing, that perhaps he had old friends or business dealings she didn't know about. But then she found a photograph tucked between the pages. Her breath caught. The photograph was old, black and white, showing a man who looked remarkably like her husband, though much younger. He was standing with people she did not recognize, their faces serious, almost secretive. And behind them in the background was a building she had never seen before, with a sign partially visible, written in a language she barely recognized. She stared at it for what felt like hours, the image burning into her memory. Questions swirled in her mind. Why had he never told her about this? Why had these letters and photos been hidden away for so long? The more she looked, the more she realized that this was not just a simple matter of forgotten correspondence. There were more documents, each revealing fragments of a life she did not know. Names, places, events, all connected in a web that made little sense at first, but that slowly began to hint at something significant. She felt her heart race, a mixture of fear, disbelief, and a deep, aching sorrow. The man she had loved for 50 years, her partner, her confidant, had carried this secret quietly, never revealing it, not even in passing. For hours, she sifted through the papers, unable to stop herself. She found receipts for properties she had never seen, letters referencing events she had never heard of, and notes that suggested dealings she could not understand. She felt as if she was discovering a hidden world that had existed alongside the life they had shared. And in the middle of this maze of secrets, one particular letter stopped her cold. It was addressed to her husband, written by someone whose name sent a chill through her. The words were direct and unmistakable. They spoke of actions, choices, and events that were serious, even shocking. She read it over and over, trying to make sense of it. Her hands shook. She felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. Everything she had believed about her life together, their love, their shared history, the trust she had placed in him, was suddenly being called into question. She wanted to confront him immediately, to demand an explanation, to hear his voice and see his eyes. But she hesitated. He was resting, his breathing steady, and the weight of 50 years of life together made it impossible for her to act impulsively. She sat down, trying to collect herself, her mind racing with possibilities. Could it be a misunderstanding? Was there an explanation that would make sense, that would restore the life she had always known? Or was this a truth so dark that it would change everything? The hours passed, and still she did not move. She thought about all the moments they had shared, small acts of kindness, laughter, the quiet evenings on the porch. and she felt a wave of grief and confusion. How could the man she had known so well have lived a part of his life in shadows, keeping her unaware? She remembered the letters, the photographs, the documents, and for the first time she realized that love, no matter how strong, does not always reveal the full truth. Finally, she made a decision. She would wait just a little longer until the right moment came to speak, but in her heart, she knew that the life they had shared was now tinged with uncertainty. She could no longer see him the same way. Yet even as fear and betrayal gnawed at her, there was still a thread of the man she loved, the one who had held her hand through hardships, laughed with her, and shared 50 years of life. That thread gave her a strange mixture of hope and dread. That night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The secrets she had uncovered were heavy on her mind, and she felt the weight of 50 years pressing down on her. She realized that the man she had known so completely might have been a stranger in some ways, a stranger who had loved her deeply, but had chosen to hide the truth until the very end. The discovery was both devastating and compelling. It demanded answers, yet threatened to shatter everything she had held dear. And so, she waited. She waited for the moment when he would be ready to speak, when she could confront the truth fully. The house was quiet, the night deep, and the knowledge of what she had found made her feel both powerful and powerless. 50 years of love, loyalty, and shared life had led to this moment, the moment when the hidden past began to surface, and the woman she had been for all those years faced the unknown part of the man she loved. Little did she know, the revelation she had begun to uncover was only the beginning. The full truth, when it came, would be more shocking, more painful, and more complicated than she could ever imagine. But for now, she clung to the memories of their life together, even as the shadow of his secret stretched across everything she thought she knew. The days following her discovery felt heavier than anything she had ever experienced. Every glance, every word, every movement of her husband seemed layered with hidden meaning. She loved him, that was certain. She always had. 50 years of marriage, 50 years of shared memories, struggles, laughter, and quiet mornings together could not be erased. But the secret she had uncovered now hovered over their life like a storm cloud. She tried to continue their daily routines, tending the garden, sipping tea on the porch, and sharing light conversation. On the surface, everything seemed normal. Yet beneath that normalcy, an invisible tension pulsed. She found herself listening more carefully to his words, noticing pauses, watching his expressions for signs of guilt, remorse, or truth. Each detail she had never noticed before now felt magnified, as if her entire life had been a film, and she had only just begun to see the frames that had been hidden in shadows. One evening she gathered her courage. She approached him in the living room where he sat quietly reading. Her hand shook slightly, but her voice remained calm, steady. "I found the letters," she said softly, trying not to let her emotions break through. His eyes flicked up briefly, and she noticed a brief flash of recognition, a tightening of his jaw, something almost imperceptible, yet undeniable. He nodded slowly, as if expecting this moment. "I suppose it was only a matter of time," he said quietly. There was no anger in his voice, no defensiveness, only a calm that made her heart ache. She felt a mix of relief and confusion. He did not deny the letters, the photographs, or the hidden documents. He did not try to excuse them. He only waited for her next words. I don't understand," she whispered. Why did you keep this from me? 50 years. Everything we've shared. How could you hide something so important?" Tears welled in her eyes, but she did not move. She needed to hear him, needed to understand. He sighed, setting his book aside. "I wanted to protect you," he said. "There were things in my past, things I did before we met, that I thought would hurt you. I never wanted you to worry or feel unsafe. I wanted our life together to be ours, pure, simple, and full of love." She shook her head, feeling a storm of emotions. Love, betrayal, sadness, and understanding all collided within her. "But don't you see?" she said, her voice trembling. 50 years of marriage. If you had trusted me, maybe we could have faced this together. Now it feels like you lived a part of your life without me, and I can't even know if I truly know the man I married." He reached out, taking her hand gently. "I know it feels like that now," he said. "And I understand your anger, your confusion. I do, but everything I have done since we met, every choice every day with you, It was real. I loved you. I still love you. And I never let the past interfere with what we built together. She looked into his eyes, searching for something, guilt, regret, maybe even a hint of dishonesty. But all she saw was a weary honesty, the kind that only comes from a lifetime of experiences. The conflict inside her did not vanish, but for a moment she felt a strange clarity. He had hidden the past, yes, but he had not hidden his love, his care, or the life they had created together. The conversation stretched long into the night. She asked questions gently but firmly. He answered, not with excuses, but with explanations that revealed a complex human past. Mistakes made, lessons learned, and a deliberate choice to protect the life they now shared. She listened, alternating between sorrow and empathy, her heart torn between pain and understanding. In the days that followed, she reflected constantly. How does one reconcile love and betrayal? How does one accept that the person you know fully might still carry shadows of a life you cannot see? She thought about the laughter they had shared, the hands they had held, the quiet mornings and warm evenings. Could 50 years of love be diminished by secrets from long ago? Her heart whispered no, even as her mind wrestled with uncertainty. She began to realize that life is never simple, and people are never fully known. Even those closest to us carry stories that remain hidden, sometimes for good reasons, sometimes for selfish ones. She understood now that forgiveness was not just an act toward him, but also toward herself, toward the life they had built, and toward the imperfect, complicated human beings they both were. There were moments when she felt anger rising, sharp and consuming, only to be tempered by memories of tenderness and care. There were moments when sadness threatened to overwhelm her, only to be softened by the realization that love had endured despite the shadows. Slowly, she learned to hold both feelings together, the pain of the secret and the joy of 50 years of shared life. She did not pretend that everything was easy. There were nights she would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wrestling with the knowledge she had uncovered. But she also remembered the mornings he brought her tea, the laughter shared over silly stories, and the quiet moments on the porch as the sun rose. In these memories, she found strength, a foundation to navigate the new reality that the secret had created. She realized that life was not about perfect knowledge or complete transparency. It was about choices, love, and shared humanity. The revelation had shaken her, but it had also reminded her of the depth of their bond, of the years they had endured together, and of the love that remained, even in the face of difficult truths. And so, she decided to live in the moments she could control, to cherish the life they had built, and to let the secret exist as a part of their story. Not the whole story, but one piece of a long, complex, and deeply human journey. She knew that time was short, and that the days ahead would bring decisions, perhaps sorrow, but also clarity. And for the first time since discovering the letters, she felt a quiet, fragile peace. She would face whatever came next with courage, grounded in 50 years of love that no secret could entirely erase. Time moved quietly, as it always does, but the house felt different now. The secret had been revealed, the confrontation had happened, and yet life continued in its slow, steady rhythm. The wife moved through the rooms, sometimes pausing to look at photographs, sometimes lingering by the window as the sunlight shifted across the walls. She felt a strange mixture of sorrow and clarity, a reminder that life is never simple and people are never fully known. Her husband's health began to decline slowly. The illness was gentle at first, just small signs that his body was weakening, but she noticed them with a deepening concern. She cared for him as she always had, making tea, preparing meals, and sitting by his side during quiet afternoons. Yet now each act of care carried a different weight. It was not only love guiding her hands, but also an awareness of time slipping away, the urgency of moments that could no longer be taken for granted. Even as he grew weaker, they shared small moments of peace. Mornings on the porch remained a ritual, though shorter and quieter. She would place his hand on the armrest of the chair, feeling the warmth and comfort of decades together. He would smile faintly, the eyes she had loved for 50 years still carrying a softness that reached her heart. In those moments, the past felt distant, almost insignificant, and the love they shared became the only thing that mattered. There were days when she thought of the letters and photographs, of the secrets he had carried so quietly. She remembered the shock, the confusion, and the pain, and yet she also remembered the man who had laughed with her, comforted her, and shared a life full of love. It was a delicate balance, acknowledging the truth without letting it overshadow the life they had built together. She realized that forgiveness was not just for him, but for herself, for the life they had lived, and for the love that remained even in the face of hidden truths. As the weeks passed, she noticed small changes in his demeanor. He spoke less, rested more, and sometimes stared into the distance with a faraway look. She held his hand during those moments, whispering words of comfort, remembering the early mornings, the shared laughter, and the quiet evenings. The weight of 50 years together pressed gently on her heart, and she understood that the end was coming. She did not fear it. She only felt the deep ache of impending loss. The day finally arrived. She sat by his bedside, holding his hand as he took his last breath. There was no dramatic moment, no sudden tragedy, just a quiet departure, as if he had been gently slipping away, leaving behind a lifetime of memories. She felt the stillness fill the room and a profound emptiness settled in her chest. Yet amid the grief there was also a strange peace. He had lived, loved, and shared a life with her that could never be erased. Afterward, the house felt emptier, quieter, but also fuller with memory. She walked through the rooms, touching objects he had cherished, looking at photographs, and remembering the ordinary moments that had made their life extraordinary. The letters and documents that had once caused confusion and pain now felt like fragments of a past that belonged to him, but did not define the love they had shared. She could acknowledge the complexity of his life without letting it diminish the reality of their bond. Friends and family visited, offering condolences, sharing stories, and providing comfort. They spoke of his kindness, his patience, and the gentle way he had touched so many lives. She listened quietly, grateful for their words. Yet she also understood that no one truly knew the full story of his life. Secrets, mistakes, and hidden choices were part of being human. And in that she found a quiet lesson. Love is imperfect, life is complex, and forgiveness is not just a gift for others, but a gift to oneself. In the weeks and months that followed, she found ways to honor both the life they had shared and the man he had been. She tended the garden, keeping it vibrant and alive, a reflection of the care he had always shown. She wrote in a journal, recording memories and reflections, capturing the essence of 50 years together. Sometimes she would sit by the window, watching the sunlight dance on the walls, and feel him there with her, not in the letters, not in the secrets, but in the moments of ordinary life they had shared. She realized that life is a mixture of light and shadow, of joy and sorrow, of known truths and hidden pasts. She understood that love does not always require complete understanding, nor does it demand perfection. It asks only for presence, care, and the willingness to walk together, even when life is uncertain. And in that understanding, she found a quiet, enduring strength. The house remained filled with memory and warmth. The garden blossomed, the tea kettle whistled on quiet mornings, and the chair on the porch remained a place of reflection. She felt the depth of her loss, yes, but also the beauty of the life they had created together. She had loved deeply, been betrayed by hidden truths, forgiven the imperfections, and endured the passage of time with grace. And as she moved forward, she carried both sorrow and joy, understanding that life is never simple, but it is always precious. The man she had loved was gone, but the life they had shared, full of laughter, care, quiet mornings, and ordinary miracles, remained. It was a life worth remembering, a love worth honoring, and a story that would live on in the heart of the woman who had walked 50 years beside him, through everything and beyond, even in grief. She smiled sometimes, recalling the small moments that had made their life extraordinary. The gentle hand on a morning cup of tea, the quiet laugh in a sunlit garden, the whispered words of love at the end of the day. And she knew, deep in her heart, that the truth, no matter how shocking, could never erase the reality of the love they had shared, the life they had built, and the human story they had lived together.